And there we go. Right on time.
Yay! I'm trying to make my chair higher. Oh, you know what I realized? I don't have my glasses. I don't have my glasses.
Oh, well,
I gotta go get my glasses.
all right, go for it. Hi. All right.
Sitting.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the stream. It just doesn't look like it's only letting me choose 360p, which is weird because I'm uploading it 1080p 60 FPS. I don't know if that's just me or what. But either way, I think I'll be all right. We're not here to see my pretty face. We're here to read a story and see your pretty face.
My face is pretty.
He's gonna make me cause a technical error, spill my coffee all over the keyboard.
I'm coming.
All right.
Wait, I'm coming.
You're here, actually. I just realized. Oh my gosh.
There. I wanted to be taller today. There. That's better. Oh, you want a drink? I see. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I have my coffee because it's been a long day,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a beer because you told me that this is a romance or a love story.
Yes, it's a love story,
I wasn't
apparently.
ready for that.
I didn't know what I was getting into either.
Awesome guy fanfic, some marauders, but that's nothing bad,
Hi, Katie.
Not saying that I don't like love stories. Definitely not my thing, but whatever. I just think once you've read one, you've read them all. Maybe this will change my mind, though.
I mean, I wouldn't say that once you've read one, you've read them all. I've read quite a few love stories that have differed.
Yeah. Like I said, it's just not my cup of tea, I guess. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we didn't actually settle on a story when I made the stream.
Yes.
So no one really knows what we're reading. So do you want to reveal it?
All right, so today we are going to start reading All the Young Dudes.
All the young dudes, all the young dudes. Put your hands up.
So, David Bowie song. It's actually a song.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't remember it at all.
All the Young Dudes by Miss King Bean 89.
And apparently it's very good.
It has over 1,000 reviews.
Didn't you say like 7,000
reviews?
Reviews?
Over 1,000 reviews on Goodreads and over 7,000 ratings.
Oh, okay.
On Goodreads.
And it's rated very well because you were reading a few of them to me and they were saying that
Yeah.
this is like a book in itself.
Yeah, people are like, I laughed, I cried, I'm still traumatized by this story. This is better than the original work.
And how many chapters does it have?
188.
Yeah. So it's the Harry Potter series.
Literally.
Mm-hmm. So what was it? It was like 20 for the first book. Then
No, 17. in the first book,
Mhm.
18 in the second book,
You
20,
got exact numbers. All right.
20
I was estimating here, 2020.
is, sorry, 36 chapters. No, 37 chapters in the fourth book, 38 chapters in the fifth book, 26 or 27 chapters in the sixth book.
So just estimating, we're up to near 160 there.
Yeah. And then there's like 37 chapters in the seventh book, 36 chapters in the seventh book.
So
yeah, it's the Harry Potter series
exactly.
length.
And apparently from the reviews, no, it's actually good.
Yeah.
Immortal good.
It's 500,000 words. 500 something thousand words. So
I misread your comment. Yes, this is My Immortal but good, except it's a love story.
My Immortal was a love story.
So no.
It was a better love story than Twilight.
I don't know what that was. It was a joke is what it was.
Still a better love story than Twilight.
Still a better love story than Twilight. Yes.
Shall I read the summary?
Yeah, let's move right.
Long fic, charting the Marauder's time at Hogwarts and beyond from Remus's point of view. Diversion from canon in that Remus's father died and he was raised in a children's home and is a bit rough around the edges. Otherwise, it is canon compliant, 1971 to 1995. This is a Wolfstar fic, but incredibly slow burn, literally years. Long build-up, but worth it, I promise.
All right, then.
Do you know what Wolfstar...
Not a clue. But you said Lupin was the main character, so... Is that like a Lupin story in the fanfic world? It's a Wolfstar story?
Wolfstar is... romance between Sirius and Lupin. Wolf. Star. Sirius.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I guess it's better than Doggy Style.
Oh God, yeah, I would hope so.
Get it? Because they're both dog, you know.
Yeah. I get it. Very amusing. Should I start?
Yeah, let's hop right in.
All right.
Oh, real quick, how long are the chapters? Okay, so they're like a good length.
I'm sure some of them are shorter and longer than others.
I just wasn't sure. Like My Immortal, it was like 3 paragraphs was a chapter.
Yeah. I mean, some of these are probably, who knows? Maybe they're all this long. I don't know.
All right. I was just curious.
Let's see. Let's start. Chapter 1. Summer, 1971. St. Edmunds. Saturday, the 7th of August, 1971. He woke up in the dark. It was too hot in the little room they'd put him in, being early August, though he supposed that could be the fever. He always had a high temperature the morning after. They used to put him in a room with a window, but a few months ago he'd been able to smash one of them, and if it hadn't had bars, he would have escaped. He'd heard them talking about restraining him as he got older. He tried not to think about it. He remembered the feeling of hunger, so intense it transformed into rage. He remembered howling and keening for hours, circling the cell over and over again. Perhaps they'd let him off lessons today and he could sleep. It was the summer holidays anyway, and not fair that he had to do lessons when all the other boys were allowed to spend all day dossing about, playing football or watching telly. Sitting up, he stretched carefully, paying attention to every ache and pop of his joints. There was a fresh claw mark behind his left ear and a deep bite in his right thigh. He rubbed his hand over his scalp where his hair was shaved very close to his head and bristled against his fingers. He hated it, but every boy at the children's home had the same severe buzz cut. It meant that when they were allowed out in town on weekends, everyone knew they were St. Edmund's boys, which was probably the point. The shopkeepers knew who to look out for. Not that the boys themselves did anything to subvert expectations. They'd been told so often that they were the dregs of society, left behind and unwanted. So why not cause a little havoc? Remus heard footsteps at the end of the hall. It was Matron. He could smell her, hear her heartbeat. His senses were always amplified after one of his episodes. He stood up, pulling a blanket round himself despite the heat, and padded toward the door to listen harder. She was not alone. There was a man with her. He smelled old and somehow different. A thick iron accent which reminded Remus vaguely of his father. It was magic. "Are you sure it's worth your time?" Matron was asking the stranger. "He really is one of our worst cases." "Oh, yes," the old man replied. His voice was rich and warm like chocolate. "We're very sure. Is this where you keep him during—" "His episodes," the matron finished in her clipped nasal voice. "For his own safety. He started biting since his last birthday." "I see," the man replied, sounding thoughtful rather than concerned. "May I ask, madam, what it is you know about the young man's affliction?" "Everything I need to know," Matron replied coldly. "He's been here since he was 5, and he's always been trouble. Not just because he's one of your sort." "My sort?" the man replied, calm and unperturbed. The matron lowered her voice almost to a whisper, but Remus could still hear. "My brother was one. Haven't seen him in years, of course, but he occasionally asks me favours. St. Edmund's is a very special institution. We're equipped for problem cases." Remus heard the jangle of keys. "Now, you must let me see him. You must let me see to him first. He often needs patching up. I don't know why you wanted to see him after a full moon in the first place, if you already knew." The old man did not reply, and Matron walked toward Remus's room, her patent leather heels clicking on the stone floor. She knocked on the door 3 times. "Lupin, are you awake?" "Yeah," he replied, pulling his blanket tighter. They took his clothes off him to stop them getting torn. "Yes, matron," Matron corrected him through the door. "Yes, matron," Remus muttered as the key turned in the lock and creaked open. The door was plain wood, and he knew he could easily smash it during an episode, but it had been fitted with silver plating after the window incident. Just the smell of it made him feel queasy and headachy. The door opened. Light poured in like water, and he blinked mildly. As Matron entered the room, he automatically took a step back. She was a bird-like, pointy sort of woman, with a long, thin nose and dark, beady eyes. She regarded him warily. "Need any bandages this time?" He showed her his wounds. They weren't bleeding anymore. He'd noticed that the injuries he inflicted upon himself, though deep, healed faster than any other cuts and scrapes. He never needed stitches. The scars never faded, however, and left silvery slash marks across his body. Matron knelt before him, dabbing him with antiseptic and wrapping him in itchy gauze. This done, she handed him his clothes, and he dressed quickly in front of her. "You've a visitor," she said, finally, as he pulled his t-shirt over his head. It was grey, like all their clothes. "Who?" he asked, looking her in the eye because he knew she didn't like it. "A teacher. He's here to talk to you about school." "Don't want to," he replied. He hated school. "Tell him to get lost." Matron clipped him round the ear. He'd expected it and didn't flinch. "Less of the lip," she snapped. "You do as you're told, or I'll leave you in here for the rest of the day. Come on now." She grabbed his arms and pulled him forward. He scowled, thought about fighting her off, but there was no point. She really might lock him in again, and he was curious about the stranger now, especially as the scent of magic grew stronger as they moved down the shadowy corridor. The man waiting for them was quite tall and dressed in the strangest suit Remus had ever seen. It was velvet, a deep maroon colour with elaborate gold embroidery at the cuffs and lapels. His tie was midnight blue. He must have been very old indeed. His hair was white as snow, and he had an incredibly long beard which must have much have reached his navel. Strange as he looked, Remus didn't feel intimidated as he did with most grown-ups. The man had kind eyes and smiled at Remus from behind half-moon spectacles as they approached. He extended a hand. "Mr. Lupin," the old man said warmly. "A pleasure to meet you." Remus stared, entranced. No one had ever addressed him with such respect before. He felt almost embarrassed. He shook the man's hand, feeling an electric burn as he did so, like battery acid. "Hi," he replied, staring. I am Professor Dumbledore. I wonder if you would join me in a turn about the grounds. It's such a lovely day out." Remus glanced up at Matron, who nodded. This in and of itself was worth having to talk about school with an oddly dressed stranger. She never let him outside during a full moon, not even without supervision. They carried on down a few more corridors, just the two of them. Remus was sure she'd... Fuck. Ooh. Sorry.
Language.
I know. Remus was sure he'd never seen Dumbledore at St. Edmund's before, but he'd certainly seemed to know his way around. Once they were finally outside, Remus breathed deeply, the warm summer sunlight washing over him. The grounds, as Dumbledore had called them, were not extensive. A patch of yellowing grass the boys used for football, and a small patio terrace with weeds growing up through the cracks and the crazy paving. "How are you feeling, Mr. Lupin?" the old man asked. Remus shrugged. He felt the same way he always did afterwards. Sore and restless. Dumbledore didn't snap at him for insolence, merely continued to smile down at him as they walked slowly round the perimeter fence. "What do you want?" Remus finally asked, kicking a stone out of his way. "I suspect you already have some idea," Dumbledore replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brown paper bag. Remus could smell sherbet lemon, and sure enough, Dumbledore offered him a sweet. He took it and sucked. "Your magic," he said plainly. "Your magic," he said plainly. "Like my dad. Do you remember your father, Remus?" He shrugged again. He didn't very well. All his memory could ever drag up was the shape of a tall, skinny man wearing a long cloak, looming over him, crying. He assumed that had been the night he was bitten. He remembered that well enough. "He was magic," Remus said. "He could make stuff happen. Mum was normal." Dumbledore smiled at him kindly. "Is that what your matron has told you?" "Some of it. Some of it I knew. He's dead, anyway. Topped himself." Dumbledore looked slightly taken aback by this, which pleased Remus. It was a point of pride having a tragic backstory. He didn't think about his father often, other than to consider whether he would have killed himself if Remus hadn't been bitten. He carried on. "Mum's not dead, though. Just didn't want me. So I'm here." He looked around. Dumbledore had stopped walking. They were at the furthest edge of the grounds now, by the tall black fence. There was a loose board there which no one knew about. Remus could slip through it if he wanted to, and get on to the main road into town. He never really went anywhere in particular, just wandered around waiting for the police to pick him up and bring him back. It was better than doing nothing. "Do you like it here?" Dumbledore was asking. Remus snorted. "Course I bloody don't." He side-eyed Dumbledore, but didn't get in trouble for swearing. "No, I don't think so," the old man observed. "I hear you're something of a troublemaker, then." "I hear you're something of a troublemaker, is that right?" "Ain't any worse than the others," Remus said. "We're troubled boys." "Yes, I see." Dumbledore stroked his beard as if Remus had said something of extreme significance. "Got another sweet?" Remus held out a hand expectantly. Dumbledore handed him the bag, and he couldn't believe his luck. The old fool was a complete pushover. He chewed the lozenge this time, feeling it crunch like glass between his teeth, sherbet exploding on his tongue like fireworks. "I run a school, you know. The same school your father went to." That threw Remus for a loop. He swallowed the sweet and scratched his head. Dumbledore continued. "It's a very special sort of school, for wizards like me, and like you. Would you like to learn magic, Remus?" Remus shook his head fervently. "I'm too thick," he said firmly. "I won't get in." "I'm sure that's not true at all." "Ask her." Remus jerked his head back toward the tall grey building where Matron lay in wait. Can't hardly read, even. I'm stupid. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long time. You haven't had a very easy start in life, Mr. Lupin, and I'm sorry about that. I knew your father, only a little, but I'm sure he wouldn't have wanted... Anyway, I am here to offer you something different. A place among your own kind. Perhaps even a way to channel all of this anger you have. Remus stared at him. What difference did it make if he was in one home or another? Matron never gave him sweets and didn't smell like magic. The kids at Dumbledore School couldn't be worse than the St. Edmund's boys, and if they were, then at least he could hold his own in a fight now. But there was always a but. What about my episodes? He asked, folding his arms. I'm dangerous, you know. Yes, Remus, I know, Dumbledore replied sadly. He placed a hand on Remus's shoulder very gently. We'll see what we can come up with. Leave it to me. Remus shook him off and chewed on another sherbet lemon. They walked back to the building in silence, both satisfied that they understood each other now.
Is St. Edmund's the orphanage that Tom went to?
I know, that's immediately what I thought of. Was like, is this Tom's orphanage?
Did they go to the same orphanage?
Did it?
Did Lupin almost become the next Voldemort?
Did they mention the name of the orphanage?
They have to.
Did they?
Or did they just call it the orphanage?
I don't remember.
I really don't either.
I don't remember. I'd have to look
But
it
that
up.
would be cool if it was the same.
Right. It had a very Voldemort vibe to it.
Yeah.
It was a very Albus meets Tom kind of a thing.
Right? Did the same thing too. He's like testing him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got one sherbet lemon from him. What more can I get? Very tragic backstory, though.
Yeah, it probably did have a name, and I can't think of what it is.
Yeah, I can't think of it either.
Yeah, tragic backstory. Jeez, as if Lupin's life wasn't hard enough.
Now we get to know about... What?
The dryer.
Oh.
Is that the dryer or the washer?
I hope that's not the dryer. I think the washer just won't spin a second.
I've never had sherbet lemons.
I haven't either. I didn't realize they were a real thing. Maybe they're just like a UK candy.
They have to be.
I thought it was, Or are you just saying that you want sherbet lemons like it sounds good in the book?
Oh.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm reading into it too much.
I don't know. But yeah, what a first chapter. Jeez. That was depressing.
Poor Lupin.
Alright, poor Lupin.
I hope him and Sirius work out. Oh, they are real sweet. Okay.
So there we go. I mean, we know how Harry Potter goes, so you'll have to prepare for an angsty Remus.
Right?
I'm sure.
Already.
I'm sure.
Which is it's really interesting to think of like an angsty Remus, since he's a very calm, level-headed person for the most part in the books, other than the whole Tonks situation and almost leaving.
Is this book 5, Harry? Right? I'm like, oh boy.
Caps Lock Remus.
Caps Lock Remus. Yeah, he's the most calm, even-keeled one of the 4 of them. James was an arrogant toe rag, as Lily liked to say.
Yes.
Sirius was just kind of...
Apparently a dreamboat in Remus's eyes.
I guess so. Sirius is... We'll see what happens. Alright, let's see what happens in Chapter 2. Chapter 2. First Year. The Hogwarts Express. Remus rubbed his scalp again, then his nose, which kept running. It had been bothering him since dinner the evening before, when another boy had punched him. To be fair, Remus had kicked him first, but the boy, Malcolm White, was 14 and twice the size of the 11-year-old Remus. Malcolm had made some crack about Remus going to a special school for backwoods kids, and he'd had to retaliate. He had a black eye now, which he regretted. Everyone at the new school would think he was a yob, but then he supposed he was a yob. Matron slapped his hand away from his head and he scowled up at her. They stood in the huge ticket hall at King's Cross staring at 2 platform numbers. There was number 9, then number 10. Matron looked at the letter in her hand again. "For goodness sake," she muttered. "We have to run at the barriers," Remus said. "I told you." "Don't be ridiculous," Matron said. "I'm not running at anything." "I'll go then. Leave me here." Remus had only half believed Dumbledore when he'd explained how to access Platform 9 3/4, but then packages had started arriving for him, delivered by owls and containing strange books and weird clothes and all sorts of oddments like quills and parchment. Dumbledore had been unfailingly generous over the last month. He presented Remus with a list of things he would need for his new school and promised to send him as much of it as he could from the second-hand supplies at Hogwarts. Now Remus was willing to believe almost anything the old man said.
Well, Jesus, why didn't Harry get any of this?
She doesn't need it!
I know, but no one even told Harry how to get through the wall. They're just like, be here. And then, luckily, Mrs. Weasley was there to tell him.
Also, where was this for Tom?
Well, he might have gotten that. We don't have the full story on Tom. Or maybe Tom was...
Tom had to go and get it himself? Well, Tom didn't want any help.
Exactly.
That's true. He didn't want any help. Dumbledore did offer to help him, and he said no. So
yeah, exactly. Hagrid should have told Harry. Maybe Dumbledore told Hagrid too, but Hagrid just forgot.
That could be. But we know what Hagrid is like.
Mm-hmm.
He'd never owned so many possessions before and was actually glad when Matron had locked everything in her office so it wouldn't get pinched by the other boys. Now it had all been crammed into a battered old charity shop suitcase, which he had to hold in a very particular way so it wouldn't fall apart. "I'm not leaving you anywhere, Lupin. Just wait here while I find a guard." Matron clipped off toward the ticket office, her big backside wobbling as she went. Remus glanced about furtively, then licked his lips. It might be his only chance. He ran at the barrier full pelt, squeezing his eyes shut as he approached the metal turnstiles. But he didn't hit anything. The atmosphere changed and he opened his eyes to find himself standing on a completely different platform, surrounded by people. Not people. Wizards. The train...
Wow, that's racist. Wizards are people too, Lupin.
The train itself was huge, gorgeous, and old-fashioned. The Hogwarts Express. He clutched his suitcase with both hands, biting his lip. There were lots of other children his own age and older, but they were all with their families, some of them crying as they were hugged and kissed by their protective mothers. He felt very small and very alone, and thought it best just to hurry and get on the train. Inside, he couldn't reach the luggage rack to stow away his things, so he chose an empty carriage and sat the suitcase on the seat beside him. He watched the people on the platform through the window, pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He wondered if they all came from wizard families too. He wondered if any of them had episodes like he did. He didn't think so. None of them seemed to have scars. A lot of them were wearing normal clothes like he was, albeit with fewer holes and patches, but some were wearing long dark robes and tall pointed hats. Lots of other kids had owls or cats carried in baskets. He even saw one girl with a tiny lizard perched on her shoulder. Remus was starting to feel even more nervous, his stomach roiling as he realized that despite everything Dumbledore had said about being among his own kind, he would be just as out of place at Hogwarts as he was everywhere else. Just then he realized that someone was staring back at him from the platform. It was another boy, his own age. He was tall and slim, but not skinny like Remus. He had dark hair, much longer than any of the other boys he'd seen, curling gracefully to his shoulders. He had fine, high cheekbones, a full mouth, and startlingly blue eyes.
Serious.
It's gotta be. That was like a gorgeous description. It has to be serious.
This is Luke. God.
Full lips.
We know.
curly, shoulder-length hair.
Yeah, Lupin's interested.
At 11. Seeing Remus staring, the other boy arched one perfect eyebrow in a gesture that clearly said, "And what are you looking at?" Remus stuck his tongue under his bottom lip so that his chin bulged, pulling an ugly face. The other boy smirked slightly, then threw up 2 fingers at him. Remus almost laughed. "Sirius, what do you think you're doing? Come here at once!" A rather severe-looking witch with the same angular eyebrows as the boy stepped into view, yanking his son away from the window. The boy rolled his eyes but obeyed, and they disappeared further up the platform. Remus sat back in the beaten leather seat inside. He was getting hungry. He hoped the journey wasn't going to be too long. Matron had packed him 2 dry cheese and pickle sandwiches and an apple, but he didn't fancy them.
Cheese and pickle sandwich? Ew. She really does not like it that much.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very good. After a few more minutes, the door to his compartment burst open and a girl came rushing in. She ignored Remus, flying to the window, pressed her hands against the glass, and waved frantically at her family standing on the platform. She was small and pale, with bright red hair pulled back in a tight plait. Her face was blotchy from crying. She kept waving as the train drew away, and her parents waved back, blowing kisses. A sour-faced girl stood beside them, her arms folded. Once the train had completely left the station, the red-haired girl sat down opposite Remus, sighing deeply. She looked at him with huge green eyes glistening with tears. "It's so horrible saying goodbye, isn't it?" She had a high middle-class accent. Yeah, I suppose," Remus nodded, self-conscious. He didn't really like girls. St. Eddie's was single-sex, and the only contact he had with women was the matron and the school nurse. They were both mean old bitches.
Oh, I guess cheese and pickle sandwiches are a thing. That must be like a UK kind of thing. I've never had one.
Never had a cheese and pickle sandwich either.
No.
The girl was looking at him curiously. "Are you from a Muggle family too? My name's Lily." Remus, he replied awkwardly. "My dad was a wizard, but I didn't know him. Well, I grew up with Muggles." "I couldn't believe it when I got my letter." She smiled warmly, cheering up. "But I can't wait to see what it's like, can you?" Remus couldn't think how to answer her, but he didn't have to. The door slid open once more and a boy poked his head in. He had long black hair, like the boy Remus had pulled faces at, but it was poker straight. He had a long nose and wore a deep frown. Sorry. "There you are, Lily. I've been looking for ages," he said, giving Remus a dirty look. The sort Remus was quite used to. "Why are you laughing?"
Because you're like...
Because I know who it is.
It's your man.
It's my man. So I didn't think about any of them being in this. Well, yeah, he's 11. Let's keep it together. I didn't think about Marauder's story, and I didn't think about Lily or Snape or.
Oh, I 100%. That's
No.
like, oh, is this gonna be them causing trouble and picking on Sirius?
Snape.
Yeah. Or, I mean, Snape, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of that. Oh, God. I wonder if Lucius will be in this story somewhere. Anyway. "Sev!" Lily jumped out of her seat and threw her arms around the other boy. "I'm so glad to see you." He patted her shoulder shyly, his cheeks slightly pink. "Come and sit in my carriage. There's plenty of room." "Oh." Lily looked back. "Can Remus come? He's all by himself." "I'm not sure." The other boy, Sev, looked Remus up and down, taking him in piece by piece. The thuggish haircut, the fraying jeans, the worn-out t-shirt, the second-hand suitcase. There might not be that much room. Remus slouched down in his seat, propping his feet up on the bench opposite. "Get lost, then. I don't want to go to your stupid carriage. He looked out of the window purposefully. Lily and the other boy left. Remus let his feet drop back down to the floor. He sighed. It was noisy outside his little compartment. He could hear shrieking and laughter and owls hooting and a few younger students still crying. Once again he found himself locked away from everyone else. He was starting to wonder if this was just his lot in life. Perhaps once he got to this Hogwarts place, they'd force him to sleep in a cell all by himself too. There was a sudden rap at the door. A short, cheerful tune, and it opened once more. Remus slouched even further in his seat as a friendly-faced boy with a mess of dark hair and large round glasses entered, grinning. "Hiya!" He held out a hand to Remus. "First year? Me too. I'm James." He nodded his head back to a short boy who'd followed him in. "This is Peter." Remus shook James's hand. It felt easy and comfortable. For the first time, the tight coil in his stomach began to unwind. "Remus." "Can we sit here? Everywhere else is full, and Peter's getting train sick." "I'm not," Peter murmured, taking a seat opposite Remus, eyeing him warily. He did look a bit green. He rubbed his hands together in his lap and stared at the floor. "Know what house he'll be in?" James asked Remus directly. Remus shook his head. He didn't know anything about houses. Was that where they'd be sleeping? "What were your parents in?" James persisted. "Did they go to Hogwarts?" Remus nodded slowly. "My dad did. I don't know her house, though. My mum didn't. She was not a muggle." Peter looked up suddenly. "You're a half-blood?" Remus shrugged helplessly. "Shut up, Pettigrew," James chastised the boy next to him. "As if it matters." Remus was just about to ask what a half-blood was when the door opened yet again. It was the good-looking boy who'd sworn at him in the station. He glanced about furtively. "None of you are related to me, are you?" he drawled. He had the same high, upper-class accent that Peter and James had. Remus disliked them all at once, knowing that they'd think he was common, and a half-blood, whatever that was. "Don't think so," James replied, grinning. "James Potter." He held out a hand again. The other boy shook it easily. "Oh, good, a Potter. Dad told me not to talk to you." He sat down next to Remus, grinning. "Sirius Black."
And so the young dudes come together.
And so they do.
Peter. Pettigrew. Should have tossed him off the train right then and there.
Right? What a stinker. Also, Snape was rude too.
I know. And it's like he's looking down on him, but wasn't Snape supposed to be poor too?
Yeah, Snape had
And,
like hand-me-down crap and everything too. Yeah.
Right? What did Snape understand?
I think Snape just looked at him as a threat. That's
I think it was just like, stay away from my lady.
Yeah, pretty much. That was all it was. I'm already excited for Wolfstar.
Right?
Now that all the characters are here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
It just on the writing's really good.
The writing is really good.
If J.K. Rowling wrote this,
You'd believe it?
I'd believe it. You notice like a lot of the dog imagery in this.
Mm-hmm.
Lupin pawed.
Yeah.
He pelted towards.
Yep. Well, maybe not at 11, but by book 5. Shall we see them get sorted now? As you go into the story, you kind of forget that Peter turns bad.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, because a lot of Marauders fan fictions tend to just like not put Peter in the story.
We don't talk about Peter.
Yeah, or like make him ancillary, and that is one of the things I did know about this story, is like he's fully fleshed out, and like you see why he's part of the group.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready,
Does it help you understand why he did what he did?
Maybe not, but I think what she's saying is like it's written in a way where you could understand why they were all friends.
Yeah, it's unbiased.
Yeah.
Writes about them. no matter what they turn into.
Right, because it's
like a rat.
Yeah.
Hi, Shannon.
I'm glad he'll be present because we need to see why they're all friends. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I
Like,
mean.
why did they put up with him?
Right. Because every other story I've read, he's just like kind of not there, and it's like, well, he was their friend. He was their friend.
Yeah.
That's why it was so horrible. So what made them friends? You know?
Or, what did they do to Wormtail to make him think, yeah, I'll betray them?
Yeah, right. What happened? Chapter 3. First Year. The Sorting. Remus was fairly sure he was dreaming, or he'd drowned getting over that awful lake and this was just his brain making things up before he died. He was standing in an enormous stone hall the size of a cathedral. It was full of students, all dressed in identical black robes, apart from their ties, and lit by candles. Not just any candles. These candles were actually floating. He might have been able to live with that. It could have been a clever trick of the light, something to do with wires. But when he looked up, he almost yelled. There was no ceiling, just the vast night sky hanging over them, pendulous grey clouds and glittering stars. No one else seemed interested, save for the red-haired girl, Lily, and a few other kids Remus assumed must have Muggle parents too. Remus had on his uniform now and felt a little bit better to be dressed the same as everyone else. All the students sat on long banquet tables under their house banners. James had excitedly explained the differences between each house, much to the chagrin of Sirius and Peter, both of whom were convinced they'd end up in the wrong place. Remus didn't know whether to be nervous or not. He couldn't see how much it would matter to him. He'd probably get kicked out after his first lesson anyway. The more time Remus spent among wizards, the more he convinced himself he couldn't actually be one. Professor McGonagall, a thin, stern-faced witch who'd led all the first years into the hall, was now standing beside a stool, holding a mangy old brown hat. This was the test James had told them about. They had to put on the hat, then somehow they would each be sorted into one of the houses. Remus looked up at each of the banners. He already knew he wouldn't end up in Ravenclaw, not if he had to be clever. He didn't think much of the one with the badger. They weren't exactly exciting animals, especially compared to snakes.
Oh my god, the hate for Hufflepuff.
That was aggressive.
He gets no love in the main books. Now tearing it apart in the
He liked the green colour too, if it came down to picking a tie. But then James and Peter had both been keen on Gryffindor, and seeing as they were the only people who'd been friendly so far, he wouldn't mind going with them. A boy called Simon Arnold was the first to be called forward. The hat was placed on his head, covering the top half of his face. Remus wondered if it smelled as bad as it looked. Matron was always maniacal about head lice, and he hoped none of the kids who went before him had them. Simon was promptly sorted into Hufflepuff, the Badger House, to tumultuous applause. Sirius Black was the first of their group to go, and he looked positively queasy as he approached the stool. There was some catcalling from the Slytherin table. Two of the older students were calling out to him. Two young women with masses of dark curls and the same high cheekbones and full lips as Sirius, who was now trembling on the stool. The hall was quiet for a few moments as the hat came to rest on Black's head. Then the hat screeched, "Gryffindor!" A few moments of stunned silence before the clapping came this time. McGonagall gently lifted the hat from Sirius's head and gave him a small, rare smile. He looked completely horrified, casting a desperate look at the Slytherin table, where the two girls heckling him were hissing, eyes narrowed. He got up and slowly walked over to the Gryffindors, where he was the first new student to take his place under the red and gold banners. The sorting continued. Lily was also placed in Gryffindor and sat grinning next to a very miserable-looking Sirius. When it was finally his turn, Remus still couldn't see what all the fuss was about.
Wait, didn't Sirius want to go into Gryffindor? He didn't want to go into Slytherin, I thought, because all his family was in Slytherin.
But he's just been sorted into Gryffindor, and I'm assuming those curly-haired girls are Bellatrix and Andromeda, maybe?
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, you probably are.
So he's probably sitting there like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god.
Yeah, this is gonna get back to my father. Or mother. Whatever.
When it was finally his turn, Remus still couldn't see what all the fuss was about. He didn't much like having everyone's eyes on him as he pushed to the front, but he did his best to ignore it. He would have shoved his hands in his jeans and slouched normally, but in his weird new uniform it didn't have the same effect. He sat on the stool, McGonagall looking down her nose at him. She reminded him a bit of Matron, and disgust rose in his throat. She lowered the hat over his eyes. Everything went dark. It didn't smell at all, and the peace and quiet was actually a bit of relief. Mmm, a small voice spoke in his ear. It was the hat. Remus tried not to cringe as it purred quietly. Look at Shannon, she's like, no!
You have a soft head, Lupin.
As it purred quietly. You're an odd one, aren't you? What shall we do with you? Perhaps Ravenclaw? There's a good brain in there. Remus flinched, feeling as if someone were playing a joke on him. Not bloody likely. But then, the Hat considered, you might go further. Much further if I put you in Gryffindor. Remus ripped the hat from his head as soon as it had sorted him, not waiting for McGonagall to remove it. He hurried over to the Gryffindor table, barely registering the cheering and clapping as he passed. He sat opposite Lily and Sirius. Lily shot him a pleased smile, but he just sat and looked at his empty plate. By the time the peas came round, Remus had somewhat recovered and was able to watch with some interest as Peter, a small pudgy-looking boy, hurried toward the sorting hat. Peter was the sort of boy who wouldn't last 5 minutes at St. Eddie's. He had a perpetually nervous, twitchy look that the other boys always singled out. Remus was surprised that James, who was the polar opposite of Peter, relaxed and self-assured, brimming with confidence, was being so kind to someone so obviously inferior. The hat took a very long time over Peter. Even the teachers seemed to be getting nervous as the minutes ticked by. Finally, he was sorted into Gryffindor, and much more quickly, so was James, who strode over to the table with a huge grin on his face. How great is that? He addressed the other 3 boys. We all made it! Sirius groaned, his head in his arms on the table. Speak for yourself, he replied, slightly miffed. My father's going to kill me. I can't believe it, Peter kept saying, eyes wide. Though he'd clearly got what he wanted, he kept wringing his hands and shooting looks over his shoulder as if someone might come over at any moment and ask him to try again. McGonagall did come over, but she placed a bony hand on Remus's shoulder. Mr. Lupin, she said quietly, but not so quietly that the other boys couldn't hear. If you would come to my office after dinner, it's next to the Gryffindor comment room. One of the prefects can show you. Remus nodded, mute, and she left. What was that about? James asked. McGonagall wants to see you already. Even Sirius looked up now, curious. Remus shrugged as if he didn't care either way. He knew what they were thinking. The rough kid was already in trouble. Sirius was looking at his black eye again. Fortunately, the food had appeared, distracting everyone. And it had really appeared. The previously empty places were suddenly laden with an actual feast. Golden roasted chickens, piles of crispy roast potatoes, plates of steaming carrots, peas swimming in butter, and an enormous jug of rich dark gravy. If the food was going to be like this all the time, then Remus wondered if he could ignore talking hats and snobbish housemates. He paid very close attention as one of the Gryffindor prefects, who introduced himself as Frank Longbottom, led the first years to their common room in one of the towers. Longbottom! We just got way too excited.
Lucius, yeah, Lucius is definitely a prefect.
Yeah, Lucius was a prefect. I'm almost positive Lucius was a prefect. I'm pretty sure they mentioned that in book 5. Like, it's in passing somewhere.
Did
I
they?
think that he was prefect, yeah.
I don't remember. I just assumed he was. He seems like the type to kiss butt.
Yeah, he actively kisses butt. All the time.
Doesn't get him anywhere.
Ugh. Sorry, we just got so excited about Frank Longbottom. Let me find my place. Remus hated getting lost and tried hard to cement the journey in his mind as they went. He made a mental note of the size and shape of every door they entered, each portrait they passed, and which staircases moved. He was so tired and full of good food that the moving portraits and staircases no longer seemed out of place. Once they reached the right corridor, Remus saw McGonagall's office, marked with a neat brass plaque, and decided to get the meeting over with. He paused outside the door and was just about to knock when James appeared. "Want us to wait for you, mate?" "Why?" Remus asked, eyeing the dark-haired boy suspiciously. James shrugged. "So you don't end up on your own?" Remus stared at him for a moment before slowly shaking his head. "No, I'm fine." He knocked. "Enter!" a voice came from within. Remus pushed open the door. The office was small, with a neat little fireplace and rows of books against one wall. McGonagall sat behind an immaculately tidy desk. She smiled thinly and motioned for Remus to sit down in the chair opposite. He did, sniffing and rubbing his nose. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Lupin," the teacher said in a reedy Scottish accent. Her hair was grey, pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore deep green robes secured with a golden clasp shaped like a lion's head. "I'm even more pleased to have you in Gryffindor House, of which I am the head." Remus didn't say anything. "Your father was in Ravenclaw, you know." Remus shrugged. McGonagall pursed her lips. "I thought it best to be... What?
No, I'm just picturing McGonagall, like, annoyed. Shrug at me?
"I thought it best to speak with you as soon as possible about your condition," she said quietly. "Dumbledore has explained that you've had minimal interaction with the wizarding world so far, and I feel it is my duty to let you know that people with your particular problem face a huge amount of stigma. Do you know what stigma means?" Remus nodded. He couldn't spell it, but he knew the word well enough. "I want you to know that as long as you're in my house, I will not tolerate anyone treating you differently or unkindly. That applies to all the students under my care. However," she cleared her throat, "it may be prudent for you to exercise caution." "I wasn't going to tell anyone," Remus replied. "As if I want anyone knowing." "Well, quite," McGonagall nodded, looking at him curiously. "That brings me to my next point. Arrangements have been made for the full moon, which occurs this Sunday, I believe. If you could report to me after dinner, I shall show you where to go. Perhaps you could tell your friends you're visiting someone at home." Remus snorted. He rubbed the back of his head. "Can I go now?" The professor nodded, frowning slightly. Outside, Remus found James still standing there, alone, waiting for him. "Told you I'd be okay," Remus said, annoyed. James just smiled. "Yeah, but you missed Longbottom giving us the password. Do you want to be stuck out here all night? Come on." James led him to the end of the corridor where hung a large painting of a voluptuous woman wearing pink. "Widdershins," James said, and the portrait moved away, swinging out like a door. They entered the common room. There'd been a rec room at St. Edmund's Boys' Reformatory, but it was nothing like this. The room had been sparsely decorated, containing a black and white, too small TV and a few board games. The decks of cards were always incomplete, and most of the chairs were broken or damaged. The Gryffindor common room was warm, comfortable and cosy. There were huge, squashy-looking sofas and armchairs, a thick maroon rug in front of the blazing fire, and even more paintings adorning the walls. "We're up here," James said, leading Remus to a winding staircase in one corner. At the top there was another door which opened into a bedroom. Again, this was nothing like the facilities at St. Edmund's. There were 4 beds, all enormous, hung with thick red velvet curtains with gold-trimmed tassels. There was another fireplace, and each boy had a heavy mahogany trunk and set of shelves by their beds. Remus saw his sad little suitcase propped up against one of the trunks. He moved over, assuming that was his bed. Peter was rifling through his own things, pulling out clothes and magazines and books, making a terrible mess. "I can't find my wand," he wailed. "Mum made me pack it so I wouldn't lose it on the train, but it's not here." "Pete," James grinned. "Your mum asked me to look after it, remember?" James and Peter, Remus had learnt since the train, had grown up as neighbours and knew each other quite well. Though the two boys couldn't be any more different, and Remus still couldn't understand. The two boys couldn't be any more different, and Remus still didn't understand why James didn't want to beat the shit out of Peter. Sirius was sitting on his bed, his trunk still packed.
Peter seems like the Neville of this story.
I think he's gonna, yeah.
Oh man, is this gonna make me like Peter?
Probably. It's gonna be terrible.
No. No, he said that the TVs were at the orphanage.
Yeah, he was talking about the orphanage rec room and comparing it to the common room.
Yeah.
We don't know. Maybe there'll be a Lovegood in the story. We'll see. We're only 3 chapters in. There could be Zeno could be here somewhere.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
What else was he in?
Ravenclaw. Ravenclaw.
Okay, so we really haven't heard too much about Ravenclaw yet, so he might be here.
He made the diadem out of like turnips and stuff. That's at their house. They have this statue and everything.
No, but I always picture him in yellow because of the way he dressed. So I go to
because Auntie Muriel says, "Did you see Xenophilius Lovegood? He looks like an omelette."
I picture him in the yellow, Hufflepuff yellow, so I think of him as Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
And he just seems like a guy who would be in Hufflepuff. Real friendly.
Yeah.
No,
he's not very friendly.
He betrays Harry, so maybe.
Yeah, but they have his Luna. Sirius was sitting on his bed, his trunk still packed. "Cheer up, mate," James said, going to sit next to him. "You didn't want to be in Slytherin anyway, did you?" 500 years, Sirius replied stonily. "Every black at Hogwarts has been sorted into Slytherin for 500 years. Well, it's about time someone tried to be different, eh?" James slapped him on the back jovially. Remus opened his trunk. Inside there was a large pewter cauldron, another item Dumbledore had scrounged up from the second-hand bin, he imagined. There was also a long, thin box at the top with a note on it. He unfolded the note and stared at the elaborate, swirly script for a long time, trying to make sense of it. He only recognized the word father and guessed that it was also from Dumbledore, but had belonged to his father. Opening it eagerly, he found a long, polished stick. It was a wand. He hadn't thought about wands yet, but he took it in his hand and squeezed the wood firmly. It was so warm to the touch, like his own flesh, and felt supple as he turned it in his hands. It felt good. You're having a hard time. It's almost like Ollivander in book 4 when Harry's like making the sparks come out of his. Sirius finally started to unpack, pulling book after book out of his trunk. Those that didn't fit on his shelf he stacked beside his bed. James stared, having just finished pinning a poster next to his own bed. It showed a lot of little people zooming about on broomsticks, throwing balls to each other. Remus thought it looked only mildly more interesting than football, which he hated. "You know," James said to Sirius, still stacking books, "there is a library here." Sirius smirked. "I know, but these are mostly Muggle books. My Uncle Alphard left them to me, and Mum would set them all on fire if I left them at home." Remus's ears pricked at that. What was wrong with Muggle books? Not that he had any. He hated reading more than anything in the world. He didn't think about it for long, though, because now Sirius was lifting an actual record player out of his trunk, followed by a box of brand new-looking records in shiny bright sleeves. He went over to look straight away. "Is that Abbey Road?" he asked, peering into the box of vinyl. "Yeah," Sirius grinned, handing it to him. Remus wiped his hands carefully on his robes before taking it from him, handling it carefully. "You must be Muggle-born," Sirius said. "Never met a wizard who knows the Beatles, except for my cousin Andromeda. She bought them for me." Remus nodded, forgetting himself for a moment. "I love the Beatles. One of the boys in my room at home's got the last 10 singles, but he never lets me touch them." "Boys at home?" Sirius arched an eyebrow. Remus thought he seemed very grown up. "You mean your brother?" "No." Remus shook his head, handing back the record and shrinking away. "I live in a children's home." "Like an orphanage?" Peter asked, wide-eyed. Remus felt anger rising, his ears growing hot. "No!" he spat. He felt all the boy's eyes slide toward his bruise again and turned around to unpack the rest of his things in silence. Eventually, Potter and Black started up a conversation about something called Quidditch, which soon became a very heated argument. Remus climbed onto his bed and drew back the curtains, relishing the privacy. It was dark, but Remus was used to the dark. "You think he'd try harder to make friends," Peter whispered loudly to the other two boys. "Especially if he's Muggle-born." "Are you sure the hat wasn't supposed to put you in Slytherin?" Sirius drawled. Peter was quiet after that.
See what I mean? Even Sirius. Sirius should have trusted his instinct.
Should have known! Should have known!
But maybe this is why Peter is the way he is. You can already see there's like a conflict between them.
Yeah, but maybe they'll open him up and he will grow.
We know this isn't gonna happen.
No, they changed. They changed it for the story, so that the Remus being an orphan is the only part of the story that's like not adhering to canon.
Yeah.
Everything
So
else
far,
supposedly.
maybe we'll find something that's not there, but apparently this has been read many times. So I think someone would have picked it out by now.
Yep.
And no, I don't think this will be family friendly.
No,
it's definitely not the worst.
I don't think this is going to be family friendly.
There's those little innuendos in there.
Listen, J.K. Rowling has one innuendos in her own books, I guess, so it's fine.
Yeah, but I think hers are a little bit more subtle.
I don't know. Cedric literally says, "I polish my wand every night."
Okay, fair enough. You got me there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Chapter 4, First Year, Full Moon.
Yes, voluptuous fat lady.
The author has included a warning that there is a homophobic slur used towards the end of the chapter. Just to make everyone aware. Yes, there is an orgy joke in the books. Ron, it's not spelled O-R-G. Runil Waslim. It's not spelled O-R-G. Alright, here we go. Slur means like derogatory.
An offensive word.
An offensive word. Sunday, the 5th of September, 1971. Remus got through the rest of the week by ignoring the other boys as much as he could. This was a technique he'd picked up on at St. Edmund's. It was better not to be noticed, and best if no one knew anything about you at all. He still got the odd dead arm or his head shoved in the bogs, but on the whole, no one ever made an effort to bother him. James, Sirius, and Peter were not at all like the St. Eddie's boys, of course. They were what Matron would call well-bred. Sirius and James especially seemed to come from money. He could tell from the way they talked about their homes as well as the way they spoke, each vowel and consonant clearly pronounced. Remus listened carefully and resolved to stop dropping his H's. It wasn't just their accents, but what they said. Remus had grown up with adults constantly telling him to be quiet, and with boys who picked on you for being a swot if you said any more words than necessary. James and Sirius spoke like characters in a novel, their language so full of descriptive metaphor and scathing sarcasm. Their rapid-fire wit was much more intimidating than a punch in the face, Remus thought. At least that was over quickly. He'd so far avoided the other boys by going for walks round the castle. At St. Edmund's he'd had very little personal liberty, and spent much of his time locked in rooms. At Hogwarts it seemed there was nowhere you couldn't go, and Remus was determined to investigate every inch of the bizarre landscape. They'd been provided with maps to help them find their classrooms, but Remus found his sorely lacking and overly simplified. It did not list, for example, a secret passageway he'd found that led from the dungeons to the first floor girls' loos. He had no idea why on earth anyone would need to get between the two, and the first time he used it he was accosted by a particularly irritating ghost who squirted him with hand soap. It would also have been helpful.
I wonder who that could
I wonder who that was.
The ghost of the girl's bath.
Oh, geez, yeah, who is that? Shannon's got it already. She's like, oh, gonna make it up.
Yep.
It would have also been helpful, Remus reasoned, to animate the map in the way the paintings were. Then at least you could keep track of the ridiculous moving staircases. He was sure one of the rooms moved as well. It never seemed to be quite in the same place. By the time Sunday afternoon rolled round, Remus was dreading Monday, which would not only be the first day after the full moon, but the first day of lessons. After dinner, which Remus spent alone, a few seats away from Sirius, James and Peter, he made his way quickly to McGonagall's office. She was waiting for him, along with the school nurse who he'd been already introduced to. She was a kind, pleasant sort of woman, if a little fussy. Katie's right. Girl might need to get there very quickly.
I guess so.
Good evening, Mr. Lupin. McGonagall smiled. Thank you for being so prompt. Come along. To Remus's surprise, the two women led him not to the dungeons as he thought they might, but outside the castle, towards a very large twisted tree. The Whomping Willow was a recent addition to the grounds. Dumbledore had explained in his speech at the beginning of the year that it had been donated by an ex-pupil. Remus thought that whoever had donated it must really hate the school, because the tree was not only terrifying in aspect, but mindlessly violent.
I never thought about that, but yeah.
If you don't know what
donate that to a school.
If you don't know what it's for, like, yeah, you would think, who would give us this tree?
Here, take this tree. It'll keep those kids in line.
As they approached, Professor McGonagall did something so incredible that Remus almost shrieked out in shock. She seemed to vanish, shrinking down suddenly until she was no longer there at all. In her place was a sleek, yellow-eyed tabby cat. Madame Pomfrey gave no sign that she was surprised, as the cat ran forward toward the tree, which was flailing its branches like a child having a tantrum. The cat was able to run right up to the trunk of the tree, escaping injury, and pressed a paw against one of the knots in the bark. The tree fell instantly still. Remus and Madame Pomfrey continued on, walking into a hollow beneath the tree, which Remus had never noticed before. Inside, McGonagall was waiting for them, a witch again. The passageway was dimly lit by torches giving off a greenish glow, and at the very end was a door. This opened into a small cottage which looked long abandoned. The windows were boarded up and the doors bolted. Here we are. McGonagall tried to sound pleasant, though it seemed a very grim place. Now, I hope you understand that we can't stay with you, but if you would like Madame Pomfrey to wait outside until the transformation is complete. Remus shrugged. I'll be okay. How do I get back in the morning? I'll pop by as soon as the sun rises, Madame Pomfrey assured him. Patch you up and give you off to your lessons before anyone even notices you're gone. She smiled, but her eyes looked sad. It made Remus uncomfortable. But then it was getting to that point in the evening when everything made him uncomfortable. His hair itched, his skin felt too tight, his temperature rose. "You better go," he said, quickly retreating into the bare room. There was a little cot against one wall with clean sheets. It looked as though it had been put there for him. The two women left, locking the door heavily behind him. He heard McGonagall muttering again and wondered what sort of spells she was placing on the house. Whatever they were, it was better than that awful silver plating. He sat on the bed for the moment, then got up again, restless. He paced the room. Sometimes it felt as though the wolf crept into his mind before it got a hold of his body, and as darkness fell outside, his senses became sharper, the hot swell of hunger beginning in his belly. Remus removed his clothes quickly, not wanting to rip them. A dull throb started in his joints, and he lay down on the bed. This was the worst part. His heartbeat was thudding in his ears, and he could swear he heard his tendons creaking as they stretched, his bones and teeth grinding against each other as they elongated, his skull splitting and reshaping. He groaned and hissed until the pain grew too much. Then he screamed. He could only hope that he was far enough away from the school that no one could hear him. All in all, it took about 20 minutes, though he never actually timed it. Things became foggy afterward. He couldn't always remember what happened once he became the wolf. That first night at Hogwarts was a blur, and he woke up with less injuries than usual. He suspected he'd sniffed around the unfamiliar territory, testing its boundaries. He must have tried to throw himself at the doors or windows at some point, because he had a patchwork of bruises down his left side for days afterward. Transforming back was just as unpleasant. A crushing, tightening feeling all over which left him breathless and aching. He wiped the tears from his eyes and crawled onto the cot, grateful for a quiet hour of sleep before the sun rose completely. Madame Pomfrey returned as promised. Speaking in soothing tones, she lay her cool hands on his fevered brow. "I don't like the look of you," she said as he opened his sleepy eyes. "It's madness thinking you can start a school day like this. You're exhausted." No one had ever expressed such concern for him before, and it struck him uneasily. He pushed her away, putting on his clothes. "I'm fine. I want to go." She made him drink something before letting him get up. It tasted cold and metallic, but he did feel better afterward. He hurried up to Gryffindor Tower to get his uniform on as fast as possible. He didn't want to miss breakfast. He was famished. "Where were you?" James accosted him as soon as he burst into the room. The three other boys were all up and dressed, looking immaculate, apart from James's hair, which always stuck up at the back. "Nowhere." Remus pushed past to get his things. "Are you okay?" Sirius asked, glancing away from the mirror where he was smoothing down his own hair. "Yeah," James added, watching Remus carefully. "You look a bit weird, mate." Remus scowled at them. "Piss off." "We're just being nice," Peter said, his hands on his hips. The three of them stared at Remus, who was just about to remove his t-shirt when he remembered his bruises. "What?" he growled at them. "You gonna watch me get dressed? You posh boys are a bunch of poofs." He marched into the bathroom with his clothes and slammed the door. After a few moments, he heard Peter whining that he was getting hungry, and they all left.
Rude.
It's a bit rude.
Madame Pomfrey is a lot nicer than most nurses I've dealt with at school. Usually they're like, get to class.
Mm-hmm.
You're faking it. Go to class. Do you have a fever? No. Then I don't care what's wrong with you. Go
Right.
to class. Yeah, I don't think Miss McGonagall would have known that the animals would keep calm. And I think it was just like dumb luck that the boys found out.
Yeah, I think they just got lucky.
Yeah.
I think they just discovered that on accident. Like they just tried it and it worked.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention, they do say that he gets kind of out of control sometimes, but they're big enough animals to kind of keep Lupin in line. Miss McGonagall's a little tabby cat.
Professor
McGonagall.
Look, they did it.
Professor McGonagall's a little tabby cat. And she's not gonna be able to stop him much.
No.
All right.
No.
Stop it.
I mean, James is a stag.
Yeah.
Sirius is a big black dog. Peter's a rat. He can't do shit. You know.
But he can hide.
He can hide. That's true.
No, Peter turned into the rat so that he could.
You don't get to. You can't pick your animal.
Okay.
You don't pick
That's
your
true.
animal.
Oh, so I guess they're lucky they turned into what they did.
Yeah, you can't pick your animal.
Good thing Sirius didn't turn into like a chihuahua or something.
Or a salmon.
Or salmon. Oh man, how does that work?
What if
If
you're
you
an
turn
animagus
into
and you turn into a fish, right? That would suck. You spend all that time
to turn into a Magikarp.
Yeah. Like the animagus process is so complicated. And then like what if you know, at least like Rita Skeeter, like she turns into a beetle. That's pretty useful, you know?
Yeah. Fly on the wall.
Yeah.
I feel like I mean, I'm sure JK did it just because of the personalities and reflecting.
Well, yeah.
It would make sense that you kind of turn into the animal that kind of reflects your personality. Like Peter, it's a rat.
Yeah.
And then Rita Skeeter, you know, fly on the wall, little
Yeah.
beetles, you can sneak around.
Serious, doggedly loyal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ravishingly handsome.
Yes. The goodest of handsome boys. Serious. What does that say about McGonagall? She's crazy intelligent and a little aloof.
Yeah. Which is cat right there.
Her Patronus is a cat too.
And she's pretty sassy sometimes.
Yeah, she is pretty sassy
sometimes. So there you go.
Have a biscuit, Potter.
Didn't ask Potter.
Okay, so let's see what happens next. See if I think Remus is having trouble adjusting to
having friends.
Yes, people be nice and caring about him. I do think his attitude is actually it makes sense, you know what I mean? Like his prickly stay away from me vibes are believable.
Yeah.
If this is his backstory, then yeah, this is...
Well, that's kind of how he was in the story, too.
Yeah. Until they opened him up, more or less.
But, I mean, even with, like, Tonks, you still see that.
Yeah, he has a hard time.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy, this chapter is going to be great! Are we ready for this? Chapter 5. First year. Potions.
Ho, ho, ho.
Oh my god.
But is...
Wait. Not only is Snape probably in this chapter, but Slughorn is probably in Slughorn. I don't know what it was about this last read through when I read the books with you.
He's gonna come in all Felix Felicis.
I don't know what it was, but reading these books with you, going through the books again, I'm like, I don't know why I never saw it before, but Slughorn is one of my favorite characters.
He's amazing.
Ever.
That was one of my biggest problems with the story, that he wasn't in his, or the movies, I mean, was that he wasn't in his pajamas.
Oh, speaking of which, Katie, I don't think I mentioned this. When I looked at the cover of Deathly Hallows again, for the house editions, Slughorn is on the cover fighting in his pajamas. It's there. So, okay. All right. I just had to get that out. Right. I was looking at the cover and I was like, oh my god, it's Slughorn in his pajamas. The cover fighting. Yes. Okay. Focus.
This is Slughorn fan fiction.
No, we don't.
Too much of a tangent. We'll get there.
It'll
come up sometime.
It will. We'll get there.
There's probably one out there.
There's probably like thousands. Chapter 5, First Year, Potions. Friday, the 10th of September, 1971.
Yesterday.
By the end of his first week of lessons, Remus had lost 10 house points, learnt one spell, and gained another bruise, this time on his chin. The first few lessons were okay. They were introductory, and while Lily Evans spent each class furiously scribbling down pages and pages of notes, no one else seemed to be bothered. There were set a few simple pieces of homework, but Remus had made a plan to pretend he'd forgotten to make a note of it if anyone asked. Charms was the most exciting. The tiny professor enchanted a pile of pine cones to whiz round the room, to everyone's delight. After a few goes at the spell themselves, Lily had levitated her pine cone at least 3 feet in the air, and Sirius got his to spin like a top, until it got out of control and smashed a window. James, Peter, and Remus had less luck, but Remus was sure his had jumped once or twice. Transfiguration was just as interesting, but much more serious, as it was led by Professor McGonagall. There would be no practical work at all during the first week, she explained, but she would be setting lots of homework in order to gauge their ability levels. History of magic was absolutely dire, and the less said about it the better. Remus struggled not to fall asleep as the ghostly Professor Binns floated up and down the aisles, reading off dates and names of battles. He too set homework. 2 chapters of reading from the set text. Sirius rolled his eyes at this and muttered to James, "Surely everyone's finished a history of magic. It's kids' stuff." James nodded, yawning. Remus felt sick. He hadn't opened even one of the books in his trunk yet, except to rip off the first page from Level 1 Potions to spit his chewing gum into. He'd actually been looking forward to potions, hoping to at least see something to blow up, like in chemistry. But that turned out to involve a huge amount of reading too, and even worse, they had to share the class with the Slytherin first years. The professor leading potions was annoyingly cheerful and took almost half an hour just to read the register.
Black? Sirius? Ah, there you are. Quite surprised at the sorting, my boy, quite surprised. I've had every single one of the blacks in my house since I started teaching. Shan't take it personally, though, young Sirius, but I shall be expecting great things.
Sirius looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him up. Slughorn continued calling out names.
A Potter and a Pettigrew, eh? Well, along with Mr. Black here, this class has quite the pedigree, Let me see. Lupin. I knew your father, not one of mine, but a damn good duelist. Nasty business.
Remus blinked. He wondered if Slughorn knew he was a werewolf. The whole class was looking at him. They knew by now he'd been raised in a children's home and that his father was magical. Remus suspected that Peter told them. But no one dared ask him much more. There seemed to be another rumour running round that he was violent and possibly in a gang. He was sure that James and Sirius were encouraging it too, though he found he didn't mind too much. Fortunately, Slughorn wanted to get them started on practical work as soon as possible.
"Best thing is to just duck in," he smiled. "Now, if we all work 4 to a cauldron, you can all take turns in order to follow the steps."
Everyone clamoured to pair up. James, Sirius, and Peter immediately claimed the cauldron at the very back of the room, and were joined by Nathaniel Quince, a Slytherin boy who knew Potter and Pettigrew from home. Remus decided he would just wait until everyone had grouped off, then see if he could get away with just hovering at the back for the rest of the lesson. No such luck. "Remus, you can join us!" Lily grabbed his wrist and pulled him over to a cauldron she was sharing with Severus Snape, her long-nosed friend Remus had met on the train, and Garrick Mulciber, a brutish snub-nosed boy who Remus was a bit afraid of. Lily was chattering away happily, laying out all the ingredients and heating up the cauldron carefully. She was looking at Severus's book, which had notes scribbled all over the which already had notes scribbled all over the margins.
The book. We read that book.
We read that book. "Here's the desiccated snail eye stems." Lily shook a tiny jar. "I think we need 1/4 of an ounce." "You can be fairly liberal with them, Lily. They don't add too much overall," Severus drawled, sounding bored. Lily measured them out anyway and tipped them into the bubbling brew. Mulciber then took the book and stirred for 5 minutes, taking instruction from Severus on how fast to go and in which direction. Then it was Remus's turn. Lily gave him the book. He stared at the page. He could see that they were instructions. He could make out maybe half the words, but every time he thought he had a grasp on it, the letters seemed to shift on the page and he was lost all over again. His cheeks grew hot and he felt slightly sick. He shrugged, looking away. "Oh, hurry up," Severus snapped. "It's not as if it's difficult." "Leave him alone, Sev," Lily chided. "The book's covered in your notes. No wonder he can't find his place. Here, Remus." She flicked open her own brand-new potions book. But it was no good. Remus shrugged. "Why don't you do it if you're so clever?" He spat at Severus. "Oh, Merlin!" Severus's lip curled. "You can read, can't you? I mean, even Muggle schools teach that, surely." "Severus!" Lily gasped, but the smug, dark-haired boy didn't have a chance to say anything else. Remus threw himself over the desk and into Severus, fists flying. He only had the element of surprise going for him. Mulciber grabbed his collar and yanked him back, punching him square in the face in 3 seconds flat. "Stop!" Slughorn boomed. Everyone froze. The portly potions master stormed over. "Get up, both of you!" he shouted at the 2 boys on the floor. Snape and Remus climbed to their feet, chests heaving. Snape looked worse by far, his hair ruffled and blood oozing from his nose. Remus had a rather sore chin where Mulciber had hit him, but other than a rumpled uniform, he was fine.
Get him, Lupin.
"Explain yourselves!"
Slughorn shouted. They both looked at their feet. Mulciber was grinning. Lily was crying. "Very well," the teacher said crossly. "Detention for both of you. 2 weeks. 10 points from Gryffindor and 10 from Slytherin." "That's not fair," James said suddenly from the back. "Should be twice as many from Slytherin. It was 2 against 1. "From where I was standing, it was Mr. Lupin who started it," Slughorn replied, but shook his head anyway. "Still, you are quite right. Mulciber, 5 points for punching Remus. Violence does not solve violence, you know, as I've told your eldest brother on a number of occasions. Miss Evans, please take Mr. Snape to the hospital wing. Lupin, you can clean up this mess you've made." Remus didn't know any cleaning spells, so he had to mop up by hand. Slughorn even made him clean Snape's blood off the flagstones. Unfortunately, it being so soon after a full moon, the rich iron smell of it made his stomach growl. Sirius, James, and Peter were waiting for Remus outside after the lesson was finished. "Bloody brilliant, mate!" James punched Remus lightly on the arm. "The way you just went for him!" "Mulciber was out there bragging afterwards. Told everyone what Snape said," Sirius added. "You were right to do it. What a prat!" "Told everyone?" Remus moaned. "Don't worry, they're all on your side," James said. "Well, except the Slytherins." "Yeah, and who gives a toss about the Slytherins?" Sirius grinned. "Come on, it's dinner soon. Hungry?" "Starving," Remus grinned back.
So this is how they became friends after all that.
Remus punched Snape in the face. That's how it started.
They came together over their hatred of Snape.
See? Where would everyone be without Snape? I'm telling you, he's the
That's
glue
true.
that holds everyone together.
The glue, or he just repelled everyone into a corner.
Maybe. You know, that's actually a good point. Same as the troll fight. The beats are kind of similar to the first book.
Yeah, kind of. I guess.
What is it at the end of the troll chapter? There are some things that there are some things that you can't do together and not end up friends.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting a troll is one of them. Punching Snape in the face is one of them, apparently.
Snape is a figurative troll.
Oh! Wow.
Right. But is Lupin dyslexic? Or does he just not know how to read? Because he's saying he can make out some, but they can't.
And then the letters move.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he's dyslexic.
Right? That would be my guess. Unless he just doesn't know how to read.
Unless he
He's
just
never-
does. Well,
He said he hates reading. But maybe it's 'cause
I mean,
he's
Snape
dyslexic.
did say, "You know how to read, right?"
Mhm.
And then he punched. I think it's that maybe he can't read or not read very well.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
It's funny that he becomes a teacher in the end.
I know. Right? I'm curious to the evolution of Mr. Lupin here because he's not starting out so well.
Already, I'm kind of invested in the story.
Right? Like, okay. I'm seeing why people are into the story.
Right? And it's written really well.
It is written really well. Yeah, Katie just hit it. Maybe he's got dyslexia and hasn't been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's really there to help him out, so they're just like, oh, he's just stupid.
And this is the 70s when there wasn't a lot of support out there for people with dyslexia. Like my dad has dyslexia and he grew up in the 70s and people just thought he was stupid.
Mm.
But it was just that he had dyslexia and there was just not people didn't know how to
handle it.
yeah.
And
She just has to,
Yeah.
it's the thing because my dad had it and people didn't know it for years. They just thought he was dumb. And
tell him, no, the letter moved. No, shut up. No, it didn't. Read it again.
I think we have time for one more chapter.
Yeah, I think chapter.
Let's get through one more chapter, guys, and we'll see what happens.
Starting off strong with potions. Slughorn trying to recruit for his slug club, and Snape getting punched in the face.
Great start. Great start.
Oh yeah, and I guess Lupin made friends or whatever. That's cool too.
It was just nice to see Slughorn. It was so exciting. Shannon missed that part. Shannon, it's like explained in the very first chapter of the story. Basically the matron of the orphanage takes on special cases. She's like aware of witches and wizards because she has a brother who's a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
So they like lock him up. It's in the beginning. Yeah, it does.
Well,
I think it's a pretty solid explanation.
Did they lock him up because he's a wizard? I thought it was the werewolf thing was the reason why.
That's what I meant, because he's a werewolf. That's what I meant. Yep. All right. Chapter 6. First year. Revenge.
Dun dun dun.
So, James said on Sunday evening, how are we going to get them back? Get who back? Peter asked without looking up, searching through his notes for something. They were in the Gryffindor common room trying to do their homework for McGonagall. 14 inches on the basic laws of transfiguration. Sirius and James had finished theirs. Peter was at least 6 inches in, and Remus hadn't started. The Slytherins, James hissed. Keep up, Pete. All the Slytherins? Peter asked, sounding worried. Only Snape and Mulciber, right? All of them, Sirius confirmed. He'd just appeared from under the desk they were sharing and presented a piece of parchment. This what you were looking for? Thanks! Peter grabbed it, relieved. I'm nearly finished. Have you done it yet, Lupin? Sirius looked over. Remus had opened his book but hadn't so much as looked at it. He'd even considered cloistering himself away in the library one evening and trying to read it properly. He could read if he really focused, but the opportunity hadn't presented, and if he was honest, he just didn't want to. Ever since the potions lesson, the four of them had become real friends, and Remus didn't want to miss out. Nah, he shrugged in response to Sirius. Can't be bothered. Let us know if you need help. You can copy mine if you want. James pushed his across the desk. Remus pushed it back, gritting his teeth. I'm fine. I'm not stupid. No one said you were, James replied casually. Sirius was looking at him, though. Remus wanted to hit him, but he was trying not to lash out so much. James and Sirius sometimes play wrestled, but they never actually tried to hurt each other, like he had with Snape. Forcing himself to swallow his temper, Remus opted instead to change the subject. "We could put itching powder in their beds," he offered. Someone had done that to him once. He had a rash for a full week on the night of the full moon. He'd torn at his skin more than usual. "Or in their clothes, if we could figure out who does the laundry, anyway." This had been a matter of great concern to Remus. Their dirty laundry had appeared to just vanish and then resurface, clean and folded in the trunks. He'd never caught anyone else in their room and couldn't understand it at all. "I like it," James replied, chewing his quill. "Anyone got itching powder, though?" The three boys shook their heads. "Could order some from Zonko's," Sirius put in. "If you let me borrow your owl, James. Mum confiscated mine after the sorting." "I suppose," James replied. "Wish we could do it sooner, though. You know, strike while the iron's hot." "Don't need to buy itching powder," Remus said suddenly, having a brainwave. "Do you reckon they have rose hips in the greenhouse?" "Yep," Peter spoke, head still bowed over his homework. "For healing potions. Arthritis, I think." "The hairs inside make you itch really badly," Remus explained excitedly. "Matron, the woman who runs the children's home, she grows them, and if you get into trouble, she makes you seed them without gloves on." His fingertips itched just thinking about it.
Jesus, that's horrible.
"That's awful," James said. "Good idea, though," Sirius grinned. "Next break, we'll go get a load of them. Then we can seed them, with gloves on, and put them in the Slytherin's bed sheets. Excellent." "How are we going to get into the Slytherin dorms?" Peter asked, finally finished with his work. "Leave that to me," James said, mercurially. Getting the rose hips was easy. They sent Peter, who was the only one of them who hadn't been given a detention yet, and was therefore under the least observation. Peter was small and good at going unseen. He crept into the greenhouse unnoticed during morning break and returned red-faced and gleeful with a jar full of rose hips under his cloak. Then they'd all lock themselves away in their shared bedroom to seed all the buds. Under Remus's close instruction, they all wore their heavy dragonhide gloves to do this, taking extra care not to touch the seeds or the fine little hairs. "I can't wait to see the looks on their faces." Sirius was grinning, sitting cross-legged on the floor next to James. Remus watched, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, James and Sirius's two dark heads bowed over their work. He was a bit jealous of their friendship. They had so much in common, being raised into magic, both growing up wealthy, both completely mad about Quidditch. In addition, it was clear that after only 3 weeks, Sirius and James had managed to secure a reputation as joint kings of the first years. Everyone listened to them when they spoke. Everyone laughed when they were funny. No one even got annoyed if they lost house points. "I still don't know how we're going to get into the Slytherin dorms. Even Peter isn't that sneaky." Sirius glanced at James. He'd been trying to get him to reveal his plan ever since the bespectacled boy had mentioned it. "Let me worry about that," was all James would say. The seeds and hairs were then decanted into another jar, while the boys ended up eating the leftover rose hips over the course of the week. It was Tuesday evening when they finally had their chance. James decided that they would have to do it before everyone went to bed. He also decided they ought to go to the Slytherin dorm separately to avoid being seen together and discovered. Remus personally thought this was overkill, but went along with it, not wanting to ruin the other boys' fun. They ate dinner much more quickly than usual that evening, before getting up from the table one at a time and leaving the hall. Peter looked so nervous Remus thought he might panic at the last minute and give them all away. He made sure to stay close to the smaller boy, just in case he had to cover his mouth or pull him back at some point. Sirius and James went first, of course, heading toward the girls' loos on the second floor, which Remus had told them led to the dungeon. He thought about keeping that particular passageway to himself, but as he'd already found a few other good hiding places, he reasoned that letting them know about this one couldn't hurt. After all, how often would he want to get to the dungeons? The ghost who lived in the toilets was fortunately in a quiet mood, though Remus could hear her sobbing softly in the last stall.
Oh.
It is Moaning Myrtle.
It is.
Oh.
I wonder where the the passages then.
Right?
Is it like the Chamber of Secrets passage? No, well, it couldn't be. You gotta speak partial time.
Yeah.
Surprised Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't stumble upon it.
Right?
That would have made things so much easier. They wouldn't have needed the Polyjuice potion at all.
Nope. Lupin, what were you doing?
Right?
Needed that Marauders map a year earlier. Lead the way then, Lupin, James gestured grandly once Remus and Peter had arrived. Sirius grabbed his arm. Wait, show us what you're planning first. James smirked that annoying grin he'd been sporting since Sunday. Oh, okay then. Here, hold this. He thrust the jar of rosepip seeds into Sirius's hands, pulling back his robes. He produced a very long, voluminous cloak woven from the strangest-looking fabric Remus had ever seen, silvery grey and shimmery. No, Sirius gaped. You haven't got... Potter, you haven't bloody got... James was grinning so broadly now that Remus thought his face might split in two. The gangly boy winked at them all, then, with a flourish, swept the cloak over his head so that it covered him top to toe. He vanished. You jammy bastard, Sirius whooped. How come you never told me? You never told me either, Peter squeaked. I've known you forever. Where'd you get it? James pulled the hood of the cloak down so that his head appeared to float in mid-air. It made Remus feel a bit queasy. Been in the family for years, he said triumphantly. Dad let me bring it, as long as I don't tell Mum. Lucky git, Sirius said, grabbing for some of the invisible material and rubbing it between his fingers. My parents would do anything for an invisibility cloak. I reckon we can all fit under it, James demonstrated, pulling it apart and raising his arms like a bat. Come on, let's all get nice and cozy. They all shuffled beneath the cloak, then tried waddling up and down the room a few times until they were able to walk comfortably together. Finally, trying not to giggle or whisper too much, the four invisible boys made their ways to the dungeon. Remus showed them which tiles to tap on in order for the floor to open up in the third stall from the left. How'd you find this, Remus? James whispered. It's genius. You come out behind one of them rugs they hang on the walls in the dungeons, Remus replied. I just looked behind it. Do you mean a tapestry? Peter asked. Suppose so? Remus was glad none of them could see his face. Shut up, Pettigrew, Sirius snapped. Remus felt a sharp kick on the back of his ankle. Oi, he hissed, kicking back twice as hard. Bugger off! Sorry, Sirius yelped. Meant to get Pete, not you. Be quiet, all of you, James snapped. We're almost there. They waited quietly on their side of the tapestry, listening for footfalls in the corridor outside. Once James was satisfied that it was all quiet, they all clambered out from the passage. The dungeons were cool, dimly lit and cavernous. There was a strange dripping sound coming from somewhere. Perhaps the pipes. Where's the entrance? Sirius murmured. Behind that wall. Remus pointed, hoping they could see what he was aiming at. It was a plain brick wall. How do you know? I've seen them go in before, Remus said hurriedly. He wasn't going to tell them that he knew there were 200 Slytherins on the other side because the scent of their blood and their magic... He wasn't going to tell them that he knew there were 200 Slytherins on the other side because of the scent of their blood and their magic. Do you know the password? Nope. Damn. It's not curfew yet, let's just wait. So they did, rather uncomfortably. Though the corridor was dank, it was unusually warm underneath the cloak, especially with all four of them so close together. Fortunately, 2 seventh years came hurrying through in the next few minutes. Unfortunately, Sirius knew them. Let's see the ring again, Bella, Narcissa Black pleaded with her elder sister. Remus felt Sirius stiffen, pressing himself against the wall. Bellatrix preened, extending a long ivory arm. On her bony finger was an enormous, ugly silver and emerald engagement ring, which she'd been flashing about since the start of term. Everyone in the school knew that she would be marrying Rudolphus Lestrange, some wizard politician, as soon as she completed her NEWTs. Sirius had to go to the wedding. Narcissa squealed when she saw it, though she'd probably seen it more than anyone else.
Jesus, isn't she a little young to be engaged?
I mean, Lily and James were like 21 when they died.
Yeah, but
I
don't
agree.
know,
I agree. It's a
I
little.
didn't really. That was weird too, but I never thought about it. And now I'm like, you're in Hogwarts. It's like high school. Flash around an engagement ring. What?
Technically, she's an adult if she's 17.
I know, but still.
Katie's like, how old is he? That's the question. How old is he?
I thought this stuff only happened in Game of Thrones.
Gorgeous, she gushed. Oh, I can't wait to get married. Wait your turn, Bellatrix replied with a voice like nails on a chalkboard. Once Lucius has a better position with the ministry, I'm sure Mummy and Daddy will agree to the match. The two young women were standing before the...
Lucius? What's wrong with these people?
Lucius should be in school at this point, actually, so that's not right. Lucius should be in school with them.
Okay.
Lucius is at the Slytherin table when Snape gets sorted into Slytherin.
Yeah.
So,
Or maybe she's just talking like he's going to work for the ministry after school.
I don't know.
They're gonna wait until he's in a good spot. I don't know.
The two young women were standing before the brick wall now. Bellatrix was the taller of the two, but they looked very much alike. They had long, black, curly hair, much like Sirius himself, and that same perfect black family bone structure. Mundus sanguine, Bellatrix announced. The wall slid aside to let them in, and the four boys hurried after as fast as possible before it closed. For the first time since he'd been at Hogwarts, Remus was truly glad he'd been placed in Gryffindor. The differences between their warm, comfortable common room and that of the Slytherins was stark. It was built like an enormous banquet hall rather than a sitting room. The walls were richly decorated with yet more elegant tapestries. The fireplace was huge and ornately carved, and a ghoulish green pallor hung over everything. More than that, the place felt somehow wicked. Remus tried not to shudder.
Wicked. And not the good wicked.
Seriously, this author is biased because now we're taking shots at Slytherins. Before it was Hufflepuffs.
Everyone takes shots at Slytherins. The Hufflepuffs, though, that's not cool.
Biased. See? Biased.
Definitely biased. But
The other boys seemed as uneasy as he was, and they all froze still until James prodded them forward, up a flight of steps which they all hoped led to the boys' dormitories. On their way they passed Severus, sitting alone in a corner, hunched over his potions book. At the top of the stairs they entered the first door, which was, thankfully, a bedroom. James threw off the cloak. Keep a lookout, eh, Petey? He said, hurrying into the room. Reckon which one of these is Snape's bed? This one might be, Sirius pointed. Sheets look greasy enough. I knew there was going to be a grease joke. I knew it.
You could say the reader's biased, but I think it's good that she's biased towards Slytherin if she's writing from
the Marauder. Yeah, it is.
It works.
It's,
the Hufflepuff, though. I'm not even a Hufflepuff and I'm offended.
You're offended. All four boys snickered. Quick then, lads, gloves on, James whispered, unscrewing the jar. Remus and Sirius pulled out a dragon-hide glove each and grabbed handfuls of seeds and began scattering them underneath the bedclothes. They'll see them, James said, sounding disappointed. It was true, the bright red little seeds stood out clearly against the white sheets, even in the dark. Well, they'll still get it on 'em, trying to brush 'em off. Hang on. Remus had a sudden idea. He didn't know how it occurred to him or why, but somehow he just was sure it would work. He pulled out his wand, bit his lip, waved it gingerly over the bed he'd just scattered with seeds. Obfuscate, he whispered. And just like that, the seeds were gone. Well, he knew they were still there, but no one else would be able to see them now. Blimey! James stared. How did you do that? Flitwick hasn't taught us that charm yet, has he? Was it in the reading? No, Remus shrugged. I saw some 5th years doing it yesterday to some sweets they brought into the village, so not hard to copy. Sirius and James immediately attempted it themselves over the seeds they'd just scattered. It didn't work the first time, the second, but after the third, James had managed to vanish most of his. You better do it, Lupin, or be in here all night, he decided. Yes, please hurry up, Peter hissed from the doorway, white with fear. Sirius tried a few more times before giving up and letting Remus take over. You're going to have to show me exactly how to do that as soon as we're back on neutral territory, he said. Remus nodded, though he wasn't sure how to explain it. He really had just done it because he thought he probably could. Next room, James announced, pulling them back to the entranceway. Do we have to? Peter asked, hopping from foot to foot. Isn't that enough? Not even close, Sirius replied with a laugh, tossing his head. What if we haven't even got Snape's bed yet? We have to get them all, Pete. Are you with us or not? All the boys, anyway, James said as they entered the next bedroom. I don't fancy our chances getting into the girls. Remember what happened to Dirk Cresswell last week? Dirk Cresswell! Goblin liaison guy from book 7!
Yes.
He ate fishes with Dean Thomas! Dirk Cresswell!
You're so excited.
Excited. Sorry, okay. They worked quickly and managed to get every single boy's room, even the last one, which had 3 sleeping students in it, 6 years. Even Sirius had begged off going in there, but Remus was giddy with the excitement of the prank now, and threw on the invisibility cloak to go in himself. He even scattered the rose hips over the pillows of the sleeping boys. By the time they'd finished, it was getting late, and more Slytherins were heading upstairs for bed. Barely able to contain their glee, the 4 Gryffindors hid under their cloak and slowly crept back down the stairs, flattening themselves against the wall any time someone was coming. Then through the enormous stately common room and out through the wall they'd come in. As James had instructed, they all kept as quiet as possible until they were within spitting distance of Gryffindor Tower, and it was finally safe to remove the cloak once more. Widdershins! They all chattered at the fat lady, who swung open for them. It was bliss to be back in the warm, bright Gryffindor common room, and they all threw themselves onto the nearest available sofa, grinning insanely at each other. Frank Longbottom called to them from his desk where he was tidying up revision notes. Cutting it fine, lads? Been somewhere interesting? Peter looked uncertain, but James just waved a hand. Library, obviously. Frank shook his head, though he was smiling. I'm sure I'll hear about that soon enough. I wish I could be there when it all kicks off, Sirius whispered, his eyes shining with joy. And I wish even more that we could have got my cousins. Oh, it's just the beginning, Sirius mate, James replied, slapping the other boy's knee. Between the 4 of us, I reckon we could go even bigger next time. Excellent first mission, men. Peter whimpered. First mission?
First mission, Peter. We have 7 years.
7 years to go, sir.
That was like a perfect chapter to end it on, too. Cliffhanger.
Right?
Good first mission.
Good first mission, men.
The Marauders are in business now.
That's the name of the next chapter. Marauders.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. No, they wouldn't have access to the girls' dormitories.
Unless this is before they put the...
I'm sure it's not. Sure.
Maybe it's because of them that the curse is put on the stairs.
Did Dirk Cresswell cause it?
Yeah.
He did it. The Bellatrix and Narcissa thing is off, for sure. Also, Narcissa's blonde.
Oh, yeah, she is.
And they describe her as having black hair in this story.
I think they got caught up in movie Because doesn't Narcissa have black hair in the movie?
It's like
Black and like with streaks of.
it's like the top is blonde and the bottom is black. It's
Okay,
like
yeah.
weird. It's like skunk thing.
Yeah,
It's like a skunk situation going on. Yeah, it's bizarre.
So okay, we said we might find some more loopholes in it, but there you go. So
Right,
that
Katie's
Lucius
with me.
should be there.
Lucius should be there. He should be prefect.
Mm-hmm. Just saying, I would totally watch the movie.
This
Doctors. Yeah,
the young dude.
100%. That's true. She could have colored it.
She could have,
Maybe a spell.
but I don't think she does. I think
Or maybe just dealing with Lucius so long it started turning her hair gray.
I mean I think she's platinum blonde for a reason. She stands out from her. She's supposed to
Stand out from the rest of
yeah,
her family.
like Bellatrix and Andromeda are the ones who are supposed to look exactly alike because
Mhm.
Harry almost thinks she's Bellatrix.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Narcissa is the natural blonde. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it just and her hair just looks weird in the movie. Like I don't get the.
Yeah, and Bellatrix has it too. She has that like crazy mad doctor look with like the strip of.
It's like gray in
Gray.
it. Yeah, she does. But she does
It
have.
kind of works though. I'm not gonna lie. She has that craziness, and then you think
Yeah.
like crazy mad Doctor Harriet.
Like Bride of
That-
Frankenstein kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
That kind of worked.
Yeah. I would agree. I love your 11-year-old Snape. His voice is almost deeper than when he's older. Makes me think of a kid trying to look cool. I was not intentionally trying to make them sound like children.
That's just how he sounds around Lily. Well, hello, Lily.
That's how he sounds.
Ready to go to potions.
I'm just picturing him like puffing up his chest too. Like come on, Lily, let's go. Seth, why are you walking like that?
This is how I always
I was just kind of trying to do like the voices that I did for them when I read the books because
just to keep it consistent.
yeah, so like you know who's talking when I read it. Which is weird because Lupin apparently has like some super thick, awful accent as a child, and he doesn't develop because he keeps commenting on their accents. But oh well.
Well, he says
the John Wayne walk. Seth, have you got to go to the loo? No.
no wonder they wanted to pick on him so much. Speaking of loopholes,
yes,
I meant to say it a chapter ago, and this one reminded me because Lupin used his wand, but he just has a wand. He didn't have to pick it.
Yeah, I wonder if that'll come into play, like,
we kind of like
later?
fast forward from when Dumbledore talked to him to when he got on the train, so I'm wondering if maybe he went in that and they just didn't show it.
It's his dad's wand.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Oh, I
because
missed that part.
he tries to read the letter from Dumbledore and he can't read it, but all he sees is his dad. His dad, like your father, he reads that word. So I think it's his dad's wand.
Oh, okay. So I guess he got lucky.
Yeah.
It's not like Neville where he used his father's wand and it just kept messing up on him.
It made his life hell for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we find out apparently Remus's dad was a great dueler. Nasty business, according to Slughorn.
Yep. Very skilled. But it looks like Remus is very skilled himself.
Right? He just copied a spell and none of the other guys could do it.
Mm-hmm. They all seem very intelligent.
Yeah. Remus just has no confidence.
Well, not only that, but he really hasn't had any experience in the magical world.
No.
Like, the other three are...
They grew up in it.
Yeah. So they obviously know a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what book was it? That History of Magic?
Yeah.
Who hasn't read that?
It's kid stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remus just... Yeah. Kid stuff.
I can barely read. I can barely read. But yeah, kid stuff, sure.
And then Lily is definitely Hermione.
Lily is so the Hermione. Yep, she is very much the Hermione.
Another reason I'm glad that they never got Harry and Hermione together, because it'd be weird. Hermione's too much like his mother.
Yeah, that'd be... Yeah, no, not okay.
No.
No, not good. Not
Harry
cool.
doesn't have the mommy issues for that.
You'd think there'd be a Weasley in this story.
Well,
Maybe
I was
they're
gonna,
a little
I was gonna
older.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they should be older. They shouldn't be there, I don't think. Unless, yeah, it's gotta be older.
Yeah, they should be. Because they were having children earlier.
But then Lucius should be there. So I guess if they really wanted to.
Well, like, are Arthur and Lucius supposed to be like the same age? I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know who's older.
Yeah, they're a lot. Okay, they're a lot older. Molly and Arthur.
That being said, it would have been cool to have Arthur there. Don't tell anyone, but I've got batteries.
Don't tell anyone. I've got batteries. He would do.
Lupin, can you bring me back some Muggle stuff when you go back?
Can you? Do you have a rubber duck? I would like very much to have a pen.
Here it's like a quill, but it never runs out. That sounds terrible. Oh, jeez.
A little bit, maybe. This story ended up starting out much better than I thought it was going to be. It was
read like a fan fiction. Like, this could be a legit book. I like it.
Yeah. It's solid, and we have
a long way to go.
183 chapters left to read. 82. Sorry, 182 chapters left to go. So I guess we know what we're doing for our live streams for a hot minute. Now I can see kind of why people are like, I read this story and it broke me.
Still waiting to see what the sad things are. Like, it really hasn't been too sad yet.
No.
I mean, sure, Remus has had a rough life, but it hasn't been like anything that make me tear up. No. Maybe Remus is gonna confess his love to Sirius, and Sirius is gonna like turn him down or something.
Maybe.
Leave him standing in the rain.
Could be.
Giant Squid will just reach up and pat him on the back.
So
he's a good guy like that.
The Giant Squid is pretty cool like that. He's a good, he helps people get over rejection.
That's true. And all he asks for is toast.
Yep, some buttered toast. That's all the squid wants.
I hope we get more Slughorn too. It was nice to see him, but we need more.
Always more Slughorn. You can never have enough.
And the author really captures each character very well, I think, with the writing.
Yeah. And
like
she's...
Slughorn, everything he says is very Slughorn.
Yes, it's very, yeah.
Sirius definitely sounds like Sirius. James definitely sounds like James.
Yep. Peter too. He does. Yeah. He just. I feel like as the story goes on, it'll be very Neville. He'll kind of get a little more confidence. Mm-hmm. She's already, the author is already laying the groundwork for, like making the Marauders map. Like, you got introduced to the cloak almost in the same way as like Harry and Ron get introduced to the cloak, except it's not a present. James is like, I got an invisibility cloak. Look at me. And
that line, Sirius is like, my parents would kill for one of these.
yeah.
Yeah, wonder why. Death Eater stuff.
Death Eater stuff. And Sirius does the same thing that Ron does. Like, oh my god, I'm so jealous. These are rare. It kind of mirrors the first book.
Yeah.
In that way. So it's interesting that the beats are similar. Yeah. This person really knows how to write very well, and really understands Harry Potter very well. And Katie's right; she captures the
maybe not the timeline so much, but the characters, yes.
That's the age of certain characters and where they fit.
It's complicated.
It is, and it's harder because like Lily and James died so young, and then it's only so many years later, and then Sirius's sisters and Lucius, and like everyone's all kind of. It's hard to. When you don't have exact dates, it's like hard to pinpoint how old would somebody be and where would they be in the story. Although we do get
marriage thing is weird,
but we do. The only thing is that we do get in book confirmation that Lucius should be at the school.
Yeah. So I guess that's so far the only check mark.
Yeah. Is the Bella Narcissa thing, and Lucius are kind of not. That's quite right. But
yeah, well, I was gonna say they kind of sound.
I wonder if this whole Bellatrix getting engaged to Rudolphus Lestrange, she's got the ring, and she's like, "Get married." She's all excited, and then are we gonna get like a little sneak peek into what happens when she meets Voldemort?
Maybe she meets Voldemort, just subtly slide off the ring. Hi.
Right? Oh, you call yourself Lord Voldemort? Oh, you know.
Yes, who are you?
I'm just saying, like, she seems pretty enamored with Rudolphus Lestrange, the politician.
What happened?
As it's a fanfic, I'm not too bothered by the ages being wrong.
That's true.
Fair enough.
Well, compared to the fanfics we've read.
Compared to the fanfics we've read,
this is immaculate.
This is perfection. Although the Bark Lord was so great.
That was the only fanfic that was just so awful. It was great.
T-Rids. We're gonna meet T-Rids at some point in this story, so we'll see how that goes. Gotta meet T-Rids, but it's all from the perspective of the Marauders, so it'll be very interesting.
Right? Yeah, I don't know how they would. Maybe just see him when he comes asking for the position?
Maybe.
Or is that after they leave that he comes? No. Had to have been then.
I don't remember when he asks for the job, if they would have been it. But it's at night. It's like in the evening. They wouldn't have seen him. And he's in Dumbledore's office. Like, I don't think they would see him anyway.
Sneaking Dumbledore's office. They have the invisibility cloak.
I don't.
For some reason or another.
I think it'd just be like they'll get news clippings about his rise to power or whatever.
Maybe.
I don't know. The Sorting Hat will never be the same. No, it will not.
The Sorting Hat purred in his ear.
I know. It purred quietly.
Stupid.
Although, you know what's funny is I loved that during the Sorting Hat scene, Lupin thinks, I think, what we've had discussions about. What about kids with lice? You're passing that hat over and over and over. Like, and then Remus, like, thinks what we all thought. Like, head lice. Ew, this is gross.
Right? Is there, like, a spell on it that it won't get it?
Or does it repel head lice? I don't know.
Does the Sorting Hat get itchy?
Ask Hermione.
No. No, I will not.
Or no, Ginny, right? Because Ginny was the slut of the school. Wasn't that part of the
It was
story?
both of them.
Well, no, Hermione didn't have a choice.
Oh yeah.
Maybe because it's a magic hat, it doesn't attract lice. That could be it.
Ah.
I want to believe that. You know what? Good enough for me. I'll believe it. Solid. Works for me.
Oh, agreed.
Ah.
All right.
Ah.
It is past 5, so I think
I
we're
know.
gonna have to end it there.
We got to end it for now because we got to get ready for our gaming stream that we're gonna do in an hour and a half.
Yes, we have a friend coming over. We're gonna be playing some board games.
Yep.
Gonna stream over on Twitch. If anyone wants to join us.
So yeah, you can join us in about an hour and a half for that.
What game are we playing? Did we decide?
Oh, excuse me. We're playing the Death Eater game. I'm pretty sure.
Are we?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know.
We're gonna play the Death Eater game.
More Harry Potter.
So more Harry Potter. Soon.
Yes, magic solves everything.
Yes, it does.
Well, maybe not.
Unless you love dragons too much.
Yes. Oh, I did see someone. We're talking about the Whomping Willow. I can't remember who said it. Someone in the chat said it, and we were talking about who donated it. And someone said Hagrid ? And I'm just like, yes.
Hagrid found it.
Well, it doesn't hit that hard.
Let's not go there with the dragons. Alright, fair enough. All we need to know about dragons is that they don't poop.
Yes, exactly. Dragons don't. Still need to come up with a kids game
A kid's book.
or a kids book, yeah.
Yes, we do.
Or maybe a game too.
I really don't know much about the Death Eater game other than it's called Death Eaters Rising and it's a board game and there is a little Voldemort statue in the game. That's all I know.
I'm going to assume it's. Yeah, I don't really know.
I don't know. I think
We haven't played it.
I think the object is to not let the Death Eaters take over everything.
Or do you play as the Death Eaters?
Or do you play as the Death Eaters and you have to take over everything? Maybe it's like Villainous? I don't know. Either way.
Either way, Villainous. Also, if no one's played that, play it.
Right?
Super fun.
It's fun. We will write that book one day. All right. Well, I think it's ta-ta for now.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yes, thank you all
See
for
you
being
soon.
here. See some of you soon, maybe. And if not, we'll see you in a couple of weeks to keep reading this story.
Which I'm excited about.
I know.
Story
I'm
was
invested.
awesome.
I'm invested.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going. All the young dudes. See you in a couple weeks.